as Assistant Secretary of Housing, Federal Housing Commissioner, and then left after 18 months to start my own company, Hamilton Securities, which was both an investment bank and software developer in Washington. And the company was very successful and became, unfortunately, embroiled in very serious litigation with the federal government. And it was through that process that I was forced to research and try and understand the corruption that was really taking over on Wall Street in Washington. And I then settled the litigation, and in the process, many people had come to me saying, how do I protect my own assets from the corruption? And so I started an investment advisory company and moved to a small farming community, Hickory Valley, Tennessee, where I live now. I was lying on the table at a natural practitioner's office, and she was explaining to me how a tapeworm works in your body. What a tapeworm does, it injects into you a chemical that makes you crave what's good for the tapeworm. So, you are the one who feeds yourself whatever it is the tapeworm wants. And so you go through this process where you feed the tapeworm, and the tapeworm grows stronger and stronger and stronger, and you grow weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's a very beautiful description of sort of our relationship with what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex and the financial sector, which has grown like a big fat tapeworm over the last, particularly the last 15 years. But anyway, so I was listening to her, and I said, I need to use that phrase. So I started to talk about the tapeworm economy, because if you look at the tapeworm economy, the media feeds us information about what's good for the tapeworm and bad for us. So, we watch TV or we listen to the TV news, and we're encouraged to do things that make money for big corporations, but in ways that reduce either our physical equity or our financial equity. So they get richer and we get poorer. And so we have this dynamic where we're the host and we're feeding the tapeworm. And the more we feed the tapeworm, the more powerful it gets, and the more we lose. A tapeworm economy is an economy where a few insiders can constantly drain subsidy from the outsiders in a way that preserves their wealth, but it shrinks total wealth because the host is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. We're going to have a housing bubble and get everybody, instead of building new skills, to run around and just build bigger houses. So you're going to build much bigger houses. And while everybody's building bigger houses and watching TV, we're going to quietly move all the money out of the country. And then when it's all said and done, it'll be too late, because they'll have, instead of less debt, more debt. They'll have fewer small businesses, because we're going to have our big franchises and corporations come in and take over the local market. And, so we'll have a party and no one will notice. And then by the time they notice, it'll be too late. So we just sold our fraudulently induced mortgages into the pension funds, and if we can't pay off those mortgages, then guess what happens to our retirement savings? So that's the conundrum, because if you look at the American financial system, we have created through force, it's called the central banking warfare model. The central bank prints paper, and then the military makes sure that everybody takes it while they're extracting the natural resources for cheap, right? The most dangerous part of GATT is the creation of a corporate right to create patents on life. So to create terminator seed and control the seed and food supply. What GATT is doing, particularly if this new round, the Doha round, goes into implementation, is basically shifting 2 to 3 billion people off the land as small farmers, and either killing them or into the cities in a process that will ultimately control the seed and food supply, as that seed and food supply is being genetically manipulated. And when you take 50% of a planetary population and move it from something where it's eating healthy food on a self-sufficient basis into a dependent role where it's dependent on corporations for food that is not healthy, then you're talking about a kind of planetary slavery, which is more horrible than anything we've ever envisioned. Now, one of my questions is control, to control, to build a global financial system around a dollar, in which the dollar is hugely subsidized by this sort of global taxation system. I mean, to give you an example, you're the Chinese, I'm the Americans, I sell you dollars way above market level, and you take them and hold them while they go down 5% every year. That's a taxation system through the balance sheet, okay? So one of the ways I do this is not only by having a military, but by controlling oil, okay? So controlling a very important physical asset is almost essential to having currency control. And one of my questions is control of the food supply part of implementing a global digital currency? So what we have in this economy is one in which literally people are doing all sorts of nefarious things, and then they're held up as being admirable and respectful, okay? And they continue to be, in other words, they can engage in $500 billion to $1 trillion a year of money laundering and the profits from that, but still be considered socially respectable. Let me just use another example. There's a wonderful lawsuit. The European Union, on behalf of 11 sovereign nations of Europe, sued RJR Nabisco for money laundering with Saddam Hussein's family, the Russian mafia, Latin American drug cartels, on and on and on. It's the most, it's better than a Tom Clancy novel. And it describes in the lawsuit how this money laundering was done at the highest levels of the corporation. Well, who owned RJR Nabisco at the time of the lawsuit, that the lawsuit describes? Well, it was KKR, okay? One of the most prestigious private equity and leveraged buyout firms in the world. So there's an official story which has nothing to do with the real story, because we know the real story is being driven by the covert cash flows and the dirty tricks. So we've got the official story, we've got the covert, or, sort of what I call the real deal. And let's say a little piece of information about the real deal starts to sneak into the public mind. So because of the internet, because of all these different ways we have of communicating with each other, people start to realize, well, wait a minute. What is all this stuff about Mena, Arkansas, and the Bushes and the Clinton families being partners on this drug operation and all this hard, and Goldman Sachs and AIG doing these dirty deals with the housing authority? What is all this stuff about Mena, Arkansas? As soon as that happens, what you'll get what I call attack poodles. They are the official enforcers who are trying to kill anything outside of the official story that pops up. So a massive effort is made to come up with official explanations that incorporate all this, while anybody who's promoting anything outside of the official reality gets hit by the attack poodles. So, for example, we see Gary Webb, who wrote the Dark Alliance story, one of the most incredible pieces of investigative journalism I've ever read. And so I'll never forget when I picked up the Dark Alliance, but I'd heard about the Dark Alliance story but never saw it. It was published in in August of 1996 by the San Jose Mercury News. I never saw it when it up. When the attack poodles got going, the San Jose Mercury News took it down, but Gary Webb published a book. Now, I've worked as an administrator in the federal government, and if you understand the machinery of federal government operations and enforcement and regulation, it's highly complex. Now, a lot of times I'll read a book by somebody, and there's all sorts of little mistakes about operations because they've never worked in government and they're not telling the truth. And I'll never forget when I read Gary Webb's book, it was absolutely impeccable. It was everything rang true to me in terms of all the details of operations, regulations, et cetera, and the fundamental economics. And that's when I know, this guy has the story. Well, if you look at what happened when Gary Webb published it on the San Jose Mercury News, he put up all the legal documents, thousands and thousands of pages of legal documents. And I have friends who are in the minority. They have news businesses in the minority community, the African American community. They downloaded all the documents. And so suddenly you couldn't kill the story. Gary Webb's story was credible with the people because he gave them the hard evidence. He gave them the documents. He wrote a story that absolutely rung true, whether it was in the African American community or to me as a former government regulator. So 360 degrees, it rang true. So what did they do? They turned the attack poodles loose on him. And if you read the story of how Gary Webb was targeted and just literally run out of the news business, it's incredible. Anybody who tries to build a story outside the official story is attacked. Now, there's no doubt about it. Everybody in our world telling the true story has got to deal with attack poodles. So I start writing and publishing all of these stories about, there's $2.3 trillion missing from the Pentagon this year. There's $1.1 trillion. There's $59 billion missing from HUD this year. And, story after story using government documents documenting massive amounts of money are going missing. Okay, so what happens next? John Stossel does this huge story about how people at the Pentagon are using credit cards and not paying the money back. Okay, this ricochets everywhere. It's like the big thing. All my neighbors are saying, "Oh, did you hear about this horrible Pentagon?" Now the money is less than 1% of 1% of the $4 trillion that's going missing. So basically, while the big boys are walking away with $4 trillion over here, everybody's over here saying, "Oh, they're using credit cards to buy purses, and this is terrible," And that's so we have the attack poodles coming at me because I'm telling the real story. Meantime, we have the John Stossels of this world keeping everybody interested on irrelevant things.